All right, we're live. All right, welcome to number, I don't even remember, of From the Ground Up. I don't have Melissa here to look up the number for me, so unfortunately, I'm just going to assume, and it's like 66 or something. But thank you guys so much for coming. Little things to get out of the way. Obviously, we have t-shirts for sale, Theportcitypythons.com. Every time you buy a t-shirt, the proceeds go to helping us put on this podcast, helping us host the podcast, that kind of thing. Also, we have Amazon links in the description. So all you have to do is click on the link, shop as you usually would. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I guess I should probably explain it's just going to be me today on the podcast with Kasper. We're doing a little bit earlier because he is.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. It's we've been trying for a while to get someone international on the show, but we were always like, oh, that obviously conflicts with time and stuff like that. Because I think where Kasper is, it's almost like 8:30 and it's about 1:30 here. So
yeah.
So we were just trying to work that out. So we decided to do it on Sunday. I didn't realize it was Mother's Day yesterday.
Oh, me neither. I feel bad actually.
Yeah, like I don't know if that's a thing where you are, but
but my girlfriend, she remembered her Mother's Day, so she made me feel bad about it. So, but
yeah, like I don't know. We didn't really think that one out. Anyway, we're here on Monday. Melissa's over teaching the future of America how to be 3 to 6 year olds right now, and we're at home hanging out. So, Kasper, could you give us a little intro about yourself, where you're from, and what you work with?
Okay, so I am from Denmark. It's the southernmost country in Scandinavia. I don't know if you've heard about it. You've probably seen Vikings, the show Vikings. I don't know. So Danish people are literally the true Vikings, along with the Norwegian and the Swedish people. So we're up in the north of Europe, and it's pretty darn cold here in the winter. But right now it's actually summer, and it's very nice. It's actually very nice. So thanks to global warming, we can now enjoy a full summer. But I'm 28 years old. I've been keeping reptiles since I was probably 10 or 12 years old. I can't really remember. It's been so long now. My interest came almost just like anybody else. I loved dinosaurs when I was a kid. But the first memory I have of a reptile or amphibian encounter was actually not very positive. I was in Florida with my parents, and we were visiting one of the alligator farms there, and they had this display with a coral snake and some poison dart frogs. And I was not very old. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And after I saw these coral snakes on the display, and the sign said venomous, I was instantly terrified of this snake. And I had, on the whole trip, which was around a month, I had a nightmare every night. So that's probably my first encounter with with reptiles in general. But it quickly grew into a fascination rather than something I was terrified of. So that was pretty positive in the end. And here in Denmark, we only have 2 species of snakes, and none of them are lethal. It's one venomous snake. It's called just a adder, a European adder, and it's not dangerous really. Of course it's dangerous, but it's not deadly. And then we have
more equivalent to our like cottonmouth or copperhead.
Yeah, exactly. It's even less dangerous than that. It's like super tiny, and yeah, small venom glands, not really potent. I think the venom is actually pretty potent, but the amount of venom they inject into is so small that, I'd rather get bit by one of those than a dog or a cat, for that matter. Mm-hmm. So, and then we have a colubrid, which are all over the place. So when I was a kid, when I came home from that trip, I was fascinated by those after learning about the snakes in Denmark not being dangerous, like the coral snakes, for instance. And we had a lot of those in my parents' backyard, so I was catching those along with the toads and the frogs and all that sort of stuff. And then my interest in animals just grew from there, and I kept all sorts of stuff like guinea pigs, hamsters, all the classics. And I loved animals, so I started working in a pet store when I was fairly young. I can't remember how young, but I did it for, just for fun. I was not paid. It was just a thing I went to once in a while just to help out. And they had aquariums and terrariums there, and I was quickly very fascinated with fish. So I got a big aquarium back home, and suddenly all the fish died because one of my family members, by accident, overfed all the fish. He just, took the jar with all the food, just poured it down the aquarium. So the next day, all the fish were dead. And I figured it was way too expensive to start up a new cichlid tank. It was Malawi cichlids back then. So I wanted something that I could fit in the tank, and it was not too hard. So I actually got a boa constrictor as a snake back then, and it just grew from there. And yeah.
So when did you first like jump into, rare stuff? You started with boas, kind of where'd you go from there?
I think my next snakes were corn snakes, king snakes, all sorts of colubrids, North American colubrids. Then I moved into some Asian stuff, and I moved from there into giant Indonesian pythons, like reticulated pythons, Burmese pythons. And from there, I moved into carpet pythons. And I was having a point where I had carpet pythons, then I got some black-headed pythons, and then I just, climbed up the ladder from there, slowly, of course. I wanted to breed stuff first, sell the offspring, hold back some, continue to breed, and then I slowly moved into, the more rarer stuff along the road. So
what's the timeline as far as like how old were you when you first started breeding, something like a retic or a blackhead, these larger constrictors?
I never bred Burmese pythons or retics because in 2003 there was a ban in Denmark that said that you can no longer have venomous stuff, you can no longer keep crocodilians, you can no longer keep like the huge monitor lizard species, and you can no longer keep the big snakes. So the rock pythons got illegal, both the Netalensis and the Sape. And then you had the reticulated pythons, the Burmese pythons, the Indian pythons, and the anacondas. So those were illegal in 2003, and my animals were far from adults at that point. So I just, sold them off to the neighboring countries. So I had to ask my mother to drive me to Sweden to sell my big snakes. But yeah.
How big of a deal is that? Do you have to have some type of paperwork to go across, the country lines?
It was, yeah, we need the CITES papers, so, or a breeder's statement. So if you just have a breeder's statement saying that it's blah 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 blah, second, third, fourth generation, his captive bred or whatever, it's good enough. So it's pretty easy in Europe with that. It's not very we don't have many rules, especially in Denmark. We just have those sharp rules saying we cannot house these large reptiles, but everything else is pretty much just straightforward. So it's very easy actually.
Okay. Yeah, I always figured it was a little bit more difficult than here, but I guess it's pretty
versa. It's not as difficult as it is in the States. There's a lot of stuff going on. I've been following for quite some years, and I think we're quite lucky in Europe with the the controlling of the animals and stuff. We got some bans pretty early on, so now they don't want to go after us because we have no incidents with big constrictors or dangerous reptiles hurting people. So there's not a lot of that stuff in the media, which is pretty good, of course.
Right. It seems like, I mean, I've heard complaints of people that there's not commercial infrastructure there as far as businesses. Like here we have rack manufacturers, cage manufacturers, all these different companies to choose from. So
Yes.
how is it different over there?
Well, we don't have big companies like Freedom Breeders and stuff. It's mostly guys making racks. You can see this rack actually right here. So this is just a vision box standard rack, but manufacturers like this is more on a on an extra base. It's not their entire thing. It's just for fun or something extra they do.
Just like a little side business.
Exactly. So it's not very huge, and it's actually quite expensive as well. So racks here and caging, you can find professional stuff, but it's far from between, and it's we mostly people use Exoterra or stuff like that. Sumac glass tanks. Aquarium.
I'm guessing that stuff is pretty heavily imported from here as far as you have the big companies.
We got a lot of the Sumac stuff and all the Exoterra stuff. So yeah.
Now, from what I believe you've been over for Tinley, correct?
Yeah, I was in Tinley last October, and I will be there next time as well.
So what differs from a giant show here in the United States to something like the ham show over there?
First off, there's much less imported animals in Tinley Park. When I was there, it was pretty much only captive bred stuff and a few imports in between. And in the ham show, it's like 50-50 of imports and captive bred stuff. So you see a lot of Indonesian stuff. You see a lot of North American, South American stuff that's imported. And of course, wild caught or farm bred, And so you see a lot of not dead animals, but in bad quality and bad shape. But you see a lot of rare stuff. So it's very different in that matter. And also, space requirement for animals in the States is much larger. So in Europe we have these all the people cramp the animals into small tanks. There's just tons of animals everywhere. The distance from a booth to another booth is not very, they're right next to each other, so it's very cramped. It's almost like a goat market if you want to, if you take the ham show, it's really bad there. It's the world's largest reptile show, but I would say Tinley is 100 times better in my opinion.
That's really weird because I've heard in the UK in particular, like the standards are super high for their shows as far as like the snakes need to have a certain amount of room and they can't see each other and weird funky shit.
Yeah, but not in Germany.
Well, I've reading like things like the Lizard King or Stolen World. It seems like, or like you see like all of our blackheads and olive pythons come from like Swiss lines in quotations from like a Swiss zoo or like come from Germany or something. Why do you know what the backstory is and why so many exported like Australian and Indonesian stuff come through Germany or Switzerland or
Germany as a country was the biggest country regarding herpetoculture in the beginning. So that was like the prime place where you, as an interested person in reptiles, had to go to get the reptiles you wanted. So all the big not the breeders, but all the big reptile guys back in the day, they always had connections to Germany because there was a lot of private people. The private sector there was big, along with the zoo there. They had a lot of stuff. So Germany has always been this kind of central for, smuggled shit for that matter. All sorts of rare stuff.
Mm.
Also the rules are not, as hard as the other countries. So, and it's fairly easy with all the borders, all the countries like lining up to the country. It's like right in the middle of Europe. So it's very easy to, just get through the
around. Yeah.
But I've actually this past year, I've decided not to go to the ham show anymore because I don't really like the the effect it has on people and how the animals are treated. So I don't go to that show anymore.
Yeah. And do you think, is the culture different as far as here we want everything captive bred? Is it there like just no one gives a shit?
No, people does give a shit, but then again, just like anybody else in the States, when you see a wild caught emerald tree boa and a captive bred emerald tree boa, and you have to pay like twice the price,
Right.
then you want to go for. Then most people go for the cheap one, because they don't know any better. So most of the stuff here is at the shows are wild caught, because the professional breeders that do breed these things, they don't sell their animals in these shows. They know the customers they sell to don't come to these shows. So therefore they're not there, and they are more quietly secretive. So it's not a place to go if you want the capture bred stuff.
Yeah, that's something that you can see here too as well. You know, Tinley is different because that's the gold standard.
Yeah.
But we see plenty of that over here as well. Now, when did you first get into Bolins? I guess most people know you from Bolins. So when did you first get Bolins?
I got my first Bolins in 2010, actually. That's 8 years ago already.
So you were only 20 years old.
I'm 28 years old. I just look like a kid right now, because I just shaved my beard off, actually. Normally I have a beard, but I'm 28 years old, so I got my first Bolins when I was 20 years old, yeah. So I saved up a lot. I sold a lot of my hawk-nosed snakes back then. I had a lot of morphs. I was breeding the colubrids a lot. So I sold all of those off, and I bought a pair of the farm-bred stuff, the farm-bred Bolins. So,
and did you buy those as babies?
Yeah, I got those as babies, as red neonates, and then I grew them up to adults myself.
And how long did it take for you to consider pairing them up?
I first paired them up after 6 years of age.
Do you think that that's a reasonable rate of maturity?
I think compared to other people, because I was doing almost what Frederick did. You know, Frederick from Sweden. He's a good friend of mine, and I've been talking a lot with him over these years. And I know for a fact that he fed his snakes very sparingly, like much more sparingly than anybody in the US. And his snakes were copulating when they were younger, but he first got eggs when they were around, I think they were 8 years old or maybe older. And they are not big at all. They were not big back then. So I just did just the same as he did. I fed them very sparingly. I kept them super lean. I kept them hungry. They were not tame. They were very food orientated. And I kept them, I would say now, I kept them probably too cold as well. Yeah, but it took 6 years before they showed any interest in each other. And yeah, I had them for 1 season, 2 seasons when they were breeding, and then I went through a rough time in my life, and I sold everything off back then, including all the Bolins. So that was pretty.
Were you able to get copulations, but weren't exactly to get the cycle correct in that amount of time?
I were cycling them. I actually cycled every snake I had. I had 10 Bolins at one point. I cycled each and every animal. Even the babies every year. So they, even as babies, went through this, colder month or whatever. And I had an air conditioner in my room, so I was always keeping them cold at night, like year round. Because in Indonesia, and especially in the mountain areas where they live, it's cold every night. It's not seasonally. It's the same temperatures almost every night. It's very foggy. It's very cold. It's very moisture. There's a lot of moisture. The humidity is super high, but they're actually also very dry. So I was trying to mimic how they were living, and I just did the same as Frederick. I kept them very cold, fed them sparingly, and I kept a humidifier in the room and I never sprayed the animals because I found that they didn't like to get sprayed on and they didn't like to soak in the water ball. So they had this small water ball, and I had a room humidifier. Instead of just every time I found they were dry, I just sprayed the whole entire cage. I didn't do that because I found them to be quite fragile to high humidity. So, but that was probably what I did, and I would do some other stuff now. I would probably raise the temperatures just a tiny bit, just because when I kept them really cold in the winter, they didn't look good. They were like, they felt uncomfortable. They were in this very super tight coil, like they wanted to hold on to the heat or the warmth they had. And I actually also got respiratory infection in one of them at some point. I never used any form of medication because I just turned on the heat a bit more and she was fine. But I would definitely do something different now.
How cold is cold? And if you could give us a Fahrenheit, that'd be great. If not, then I'm gonna.
Because we're not Fahrenheit over here. We are Celsius. So I luckily have a converter. I'll try to see how much.
What's bad is on my YouTube videos, I always Europe and the UK, and people are putting it in Celsius.
Yeah, so I was keeping them all the way down to in Europe it's 10 Celsius, it's 10 degrees, but in Fahrenheit it's 50. So I was going down to 50.
Holy shit, that's cold.
It was super cold, and I did that once, and I would not recommend doing that, to be quite honest. So wow. I was normally just doing 55, something like that, I believe, which is pretty cool as well. Oh, sorry, not 55, 59 to be exact. 59 Fahrenheit. That was like my normal cold temperature in the nights. So yeah.
Yeah, I think most of us who keep pythons, it's like we never get usually below 70 degrees unless maybe you're messing with some bread lye or something like that.
But it's funny. It's funny. People are just keeping pythons, in my opinion, totally wrong. I have, ever since I switched all my pythons, I've kept tons of stuff, and I switched all my cages from heat mats, like underneath heat mats. I changed to light bulbs instead, and I had a thermostat on, a dimmer thermostat, and every night all year round I turned off the heat. And ever since I did that, I've never had an RI again. I think one of the reasons people get so many RI is because they keep the heat on at night. For instance, you can just, you can take us human beings, for instance. If we were supposed to be kept in a room that was the same temperature in the cold spot all year round, and we got out like one night in the winter, we would get cold instantly. If we were getting those cold temperatures once in a while, every night, we would never get sick. So you build up a weak snake. If you keep it hot all the time, you keep it warm at night, you'll have if you get cold temperatures just once, you'll have a sick snake. So to build up a very nice, healthy snake, you have to keep it cold at night. Simple as that. It's very simple. And after I did that, I've never had an RI again, which is pretty cool.
Really? And is that all like Indonesian pythons and Australian pythons?
Yeah, Indonesian and Australian pythons. Yeah, all species. Okay. All species. Also, I do keep my pythons. I did keep my pythons a lot colder in the hot spot than most people do, because I just found that they didn't need it. I never saw them like really soaking. And I just, decided to turn the heat down. And after that, I got major success breeding lots of stuff. And I'm actually only giving my pythons, I don't keep any now, but when I did, I was only keeping them at 86 Fahrenheit as a hotspot, which is very hot.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see people shift. Or I know a few people who, and I do this just because I always kept corn snakes, so I always had 85 hot spot, and then room temperature was always like 73 or something, and I just kept my pythons on that, and they've been doing fine. I've never had an RI or anything like that.
It's fantastic. I think I just know so many people, and especially new people that are not very much into like the whole biology of snakes, and just go with whatever they're told or whatever's on the internet, and they get a lot of RIs all the time, and I can really just tell the difference now, and I'm not afraid to even my my more fragile species. I'm not afraid to go into the low temperatures at night with those because they're reptiles. They're cold-blooded. They can and will survive a cold temperature. Actually, a more hotter temperature is a way bigger killer than the cold temperatures with reptiles. So that's just my 2 cents.
What'd you get into as far as like Bolins? You said papuans and stuff like that. What did you start getting into?
I started getting my first Indonesian pythons, actually I moved into Beaded pythons and diamond pythons, and from there I moved into scrub pythons. Yeah, and then from there, I got Moluccans, I got papuans, I got Bolins, and yeah.
What was the first python species that you successfully bred?
That was carpet pythons.
Which what kind of carpets?
Iron Gias or Papuan carpet pythons. Yeah.
That's always confusing, by the way. I just still call them IJs.
Yeah, but we should just keep calling them IJs because first of all, it's a cool name and everybody knows them as IJs, so whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to
anyway. We're not like scientific people, or they're not supposed to going back into the wild and whatever. So call them whatever.
There was some paper saying that IJs are jungles or coastals or everything. So who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
But what did you find differently from moving into the pythons from colubrids? Like, what made do you like pythons more, or are you still kind of finding out what you like?
I think I'm still finding out what I like. I like everything, to be honest. I just like trying a lot of new stuff, and I don't have unlimited time, so I have to sell off projects once in a while, move into something new just because I wanted to try and learn more. I think the most funny process in this hobby is actually learning about a brand new species. I love reading books, so I have like a huge library, and if I stumble over across a species I really like, if I've read a species and I already have kept it for many years, I have no regret selling it and trying something new at all. So I try to move into as many species as I can and learn a lot instead of just staying and keeping the same stuff.
Yeah,
it's actually funny because I find there's people are not negative towards me, but I find if I see other people like stating, okay, I'm actually freaking tired of this species of snakes and I'm selling it, I've only had it for 2 months, I see a lot of negativity in the hobby towards people that does that. And to be honest, it's actually just natural. If you stumble across a species and you see it on a reptile show, you find it really beautiful, then you take it back home and suddenly it's not as interesting as you thought. Why should you then keep it? Then people say, well, you should have researched a lot before or whatever, but you have to try something, and you have to be sporadic sometimes just to actually find those species you really like, because there's so many to choose from, and you cannot read about on every species in the hobby because that's impossible. So sometimes when you just see something that you like, just go for it.
So what do you think as far as how have you had success like moving through different projects? Like, do you have a certain way that you try to tackle everything and then adjust from there according to the species?
Um, I have, just like Eric does, I have a cold room, I have a room that's actually fairly hot, and I have a ambient room, so ambient temperature room, or just a standard room. So first of all, I usually try and buy the species or buy the snakes or lizards as babies. So I can grow them up slowly to adulthood, and I can learn the snakes I'm working with, and they can slowly get used to my space around me. And I've not really species like Boelens pythons or diamond pythons. They need that cold temperatures at the winter season to actually grow follicles to reproduce. So of course I'll keep those colder, and I never mix species. Cold species has one room. Species that requires a lot of heat like monitor lizards has one room, and ambient species or species that do well with ambient temperatures like colubrids and some of the colder range whatever pythons, they have one room, and so forth. And I've actually had very good success doing that, and I've done that all the time because I was so lucky just to have 3 rooms that I could house my animals in. So I've just I've never put, like, for instance, let's say I never put a diamond python in the same room as a rock monitor or whatever, because I know they have 2 different requirements. So I know if I have to keep the exact or the optimal temperature for the monitor lizard, the diamond pythons will never breed in this room, and vice versa. So I know for a fact that those 2 species don't fit in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
And by thinking that way with all the species, I think it's a pretty good start. Because I think a lot of people don't have the success they want because they only have maybe 1 or 2 rooms available for them, and they want so many different species that require so many different temperatures and come from so many different places in the world, which of course, if you want to breed them all, they don't need the same humidity, they don't need the same temperatures and so forth. So I think if you want to try a lot of stuff, you need a lot of space.
Yeah, I think that's something that
if you want to breed it, if you want to keep it, it's a whole other story, of course.
right. So do you think that, I don't know if you do feed cycling, obviously you mix up the heat, you do drops at night and do winter drops, that kind of stuff. What's your biggest determining factor when trying to breed?
It's feed cycling, food cycling. Yeah.
So what would you do, say, your Australian pythons? How would you feed them differently according to the seasons?
With the Komodo pythons, I did the same thing with the everything except the Brettles and the diamond pythons. I just actually I didn't really cool them that much down. The room temperature itself fell in the winter period, and I just the hour cycle, I just cycled it down to 8 hours instead, and I kept the hotspot maybe 1 or 2 degrees Celsius lower, and that factor alone, I find it not to be very successful in breeding carpet pythons. So I also, after the cooling period, I didn't feed those 3 months, but after that, I started feeding the female, once every week actually, but not with a huge prey item. I just took like a tiny 100-gram rat or so and fed them, and they started building the follicles right away, and because they're used to that. Like in their biology, they're used to that extra food or that period when they come out of the cold season. Everything started flourishing. All the rodents come out, and there's like this big feast for them. So they're used to get that extra food in. So I think that food cycling is the most important stuff you can do. So I do feed right after the cooling period. Then I actually don't feed a lot in the summer at all. I almost don't feed. Then I bump up the food right before, or a few months before the cool period starts again. So, and that seems to, over the years get the females like really used to the cycle, and so far it has been very easy.
Now I know in the UK they have like the no live feeding or stuff. Does that extend to where you are? Are there any crazy laws like that?
There is a rule in Denmark saying that you cannot feed live to an animal unless it requires live food to survive. You know what I mean? So you can if you know your whatever boa constrictor, it can eat frozen thawed items, then it's illegal to feed it a live item. If you know it eats frozen thawed, it's illegal to feed it live. But if it's a ball python and it never would touch a frozen thawed item, it's legal to feed it live. But
how would they ever enforce that law?
How would they ever control it? It's just dumb, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So is there any issue like getting food or anything like that?
It's in periods, actually. Sometimes the prices go up a lot because the demand is so high and there's not a lot of producers of rats or mice. So the prices it's actually a big market, of course, and the prices go up and down all the time. But I've never had issues getting, rats and mice. I just pay the price and shut up. My money. But it's expensive. It's way more expensive over here than in the States, of course. Yeah.
Mm. So how do you manage as far as like monetarily, time-wise and stuff like that to get in all the different snake species, all the food, all of that kind of stuff, and kind of also have your own personal life?
Well, all the reptiles and all the snakes and the lizards have come in different time periods. So right now, for example, I don't keep that many animals.
What was the peak of your collection and what do you have now?
I keep primarily beaded lizards, and I keep some boas, and I keep some monitor lizards. But most of my monitor lizards are actually on loan right now because I do need to live a bit, so I cannot, run around feeding tons of monitor lizards while taking care of boas and beaded lizards. So I need to just, I couldn't get myself to sell them, so I just sent them on loan instead.
Gotcha. And you just did some traveling, so kind of explain what you were doing.
So first of all, I was invited by my parents to Guatemala, me and my girlfriend, which is awesome. It's a pretty long, plane ride, but it's worth it. But I just told them, can I please take 2 days off the schedule and go to this Motagua Valley in Guatemala? Because I know there's one of the world's rarest lizards called the Guatemalan or the Motagua Valley beaded lizard. And they just said, yeah, we'll tag along. It sounds like a great plan. So I planned some month ahead and in advance, and I got contact with the biologist working in the field with that species. And I was actually lucky enough to bring my whole family to the Motagua Valley dry forest and actually see those animals in the wild. So that was pretty incredible.
So for background, what exactly is that specific beaded lizard and what's special about it?
I do actually have this. It's a Tel Hicks picture of all the Heloderma species. So I don't know if you can see it very well here, but on the top we got the Gila monsters. It's Heloderma suspectum cinctum and Heloderma suspectum. Those are actually the same species right now, but they were once described as two different species. And then you have the four species of beaded lizards. You have the Rio Fuerte, the Exasperatum beaded lizards. You have the normal beaded lizards, the Mexican beaded lizard. Then you have the Chiapas region beaded lizard, and then you have the Motagua Valley beaded lizards. So they're, I don't know if you can see right here, but they're quite different for the trained eye. The Motagua Valley beaded lizards is by far the smallest of the beaded lizard species, and it's the how do you say it? It's the species that have the longest distance with surrounded by mountain areas from the other species. All the other species do actually integrate with each other, except the Guatemalan species.
Yeah, so these guys are completely isolated with mountains around them.
Exactly, and they have been so for many millions of years. So they are very different, also genetically speaking. So, and they were actually first described very, very late. I believe it's in the 90s, something like that. And they were actually almost thought to be extinct until the biologist Daniel Ariano he found them again and started his conservation project. Yeah.
So what was the habitat like, and was it difficult to find them?
It was, first of all, it's the rarest, probably one of the rarest species in the world. There have been said to be under 200 left in the wild. And Motagua Valley is not a very big, valley, and it's filled with farmers doing papayas, farmers, apple farmers, tons of farmers all around, and they are actually like killing the animals when they see them on site. And this makes this lizard exceptionally rare to see in the wild, because they have just this tiny bit of habitat left where they can actually survive. But yeah, their habitat is actually, it's called a dry forest, and it's because in 7 or 6 months of the year they're actually burrowed down into the ground because it's so dry, and there's absolutely no food for them. So they just they don't hibernate because it's actually not very cold in those burrows, but they just go, they just, what is it called when you don't hibernate but you're staying? What is that called?
I have no idea. They just maintenance. They just maintain.
They just stay in the same place for 7 months in the dry period, and then in the summer or the rain season, everything just flourished back up, and it's the contrast between the dry season and the rain season is just insane. Wow. It's absolutely insane. These animals are living probably in one of the harshest conditions you can as an animal, and it's insane. And you can really, when you see one in the wild, you really appreciate it, because these animals are facing a fast form of extinction if we don't do something. So it's actually very severe, and to seeing one in the wild is almost impossible. Daniel, he told me about a biology student that came to the area for 2 years, just stayed at the small place they had, at the small cabin, and never saw one in the wild. I was super fortunate to spending only 2 nights there, and actually on the second night seeing one in the wild, which is unheard of. So that was pretty cool.
Did you just see them walking around out there? Were you flipping?
Okay, so I knew for a fact, because it was in the end of the dry season. So I knew for a fact that coming there, seeing one in the wild is next to impossible. So my expectations were set very low. I knew they had one, that they used for education, that they had at the place. So I knew I would see one, but I didn't expect to see a wild one. So I came there in the dry season, the last part of the dry season, and I spent 2 days and 2 nights at the place, and we saw tons of cool stuff, like birds, small geckos, arachnids, scorpions, tarantulas, stuff like that. And I just knew for a fact that rainy season hasn't started yet, so they weren't coming out from their burrows. So we were just spending the nights looking for everything else, rattlesnakes, new tropical rattlesnakes.
Was this on the road spotlighting or something?
No, we did that as well, but we walked, in the bottom of a dried out river bank, so we could just, we were walking in the river, the dried out river, and we just looked up at the river banks, just, of course, with our headlamps and spotlights, trying to find stuff. And we went out for a walk the second night for 4 hours. We found awesome stuff. I was super high because we found the Coleonyx geckos. I don't know if you know those.
No.
Coleonyx mistratus. They're actually also found in North America. Some of the other species. They're super cool. They look like a leopard gecko. They're islet gecko species. We found those. We found a lyre snake, which is a rear-fanged colubrid. We found a snail-eating snake, a seapan. We found some iguanas and stuff like that. I was over the moon just by that. And then after 4 hours, we were like, Daniel told me, like the biologist told me that, okay, let's head back home very soon because it's getting late and we were tired. It's super hot even in the night. And we just wanted to go back home. And then we suddenly just went like maybe 10 minutes more down the river. And then we just heard this like huge hiss. And then he was in front of me and he just yelled, "Escorpion, escorpion," which means in Spanish, scorpion lizard. And I just started running with the other guys, and there was a beautiful adult female, a young adult female. So that was it, and we made a video about it, and people were like over the moon, almost crying.
So is that what they call a beaded lizard?
Yeah, they call them lots of different stuff, and they are actually very negatively described in the local communities because they're just like ancient folklore about them, saying that if you see its shadow, you will, if you're carrying a children, you will lose your child, or something like that. So there are tons of bad names for it, but it's called scorpion lizard mostly. Yeah.
That's wild. So what were some things about this place in particular in Guatemala that makes it, I mean, I'm trying to get an idea of like the habitat and everything there. What kind of, go for it.
Yeah, I can actually, I took tons of photos. I took tons of photos of the animal we found. I took of the habitat there, and I can actually just send them to you, and you can just put them up on your page or whatever, so people can see what it's like, because it's very hard to describe. It's super harsh conditions, but their like optimal habitat is a mountainside, not a steep mountainside, but just a regular mountainside, and they dig like straight into the side of the mountain, and they dig beneath some of these what is it called? It's like very it's a bromeliad, a bromeliad plant, but it's a gram bromeliad, so it's not like a normal bromeliad you see in your flower shops, flower stores. It's a very harsh and very almost it's a very tough plant. It's almost like a cacti, so it's you can't stick your hand in the hole underneath there to grab them, and they dig these large holes, deep burrows, and stay underneath for like 90% of their life. They're using those burrows, and they come out at night sometimes to feed. They are actually, compared to some of the other beaded lizard species, that have longer limbs because they use they use their limbs to climb up the trees and eat eggs, and in birds' nests and other nests. So their main diet is actually reptile and or birds' eggs.
That's probably the last thing I would expect of
Exactly.
something of
Especially
like their
because it's
shape.
especially because it's in family with the Gila monster. And when you see Gila monster, you can see right away that animal is not made for climbing. That's for sure. And also there are burying species, but I think in this habitat there's not a lot of food, but there's a lot of birds and there's a lot of bird nests. So they need those limbs to actually be able to eat, sustain themselves with enough protein to reproduce. So that's a very important diet for them.
That's crazy. I mean, the more you think about it, the more it makes sense as far as they're not eating for periods of months and months. So obviously they're going to be smaller and then it's harder to get food. So obviously they've, evolved more so to be able to get this food, which is just crazy.
And they also have this. They also have a symbiotic relationship with a very endangered iguana as well, called the black iguana. It's called Stenosaura pilaris, and it only lives in the Mutagara Valley region as well. It's also super endangered, and they have this symbiotic relationship where the iguana primarily live off flowers and seeds of the cacti that the Heloderma uses as to burrow underneath. Also, the Heloderma eats the eggs of the iguana. So it's pretty cool to see like these two species like really they need each other to survive, and both species are actually highly endangered. So if one species dies out, the other one is even less likely to survive, and which is very sad, but also very interesting.
Do you know what kind of square mileage this little area is that's isolated?
Yeah, it's really sad because the place that the Heloderma Reserve is placed, the field station, is placed on like in the middle of the highest concentration of this beaded lizard, and it's only 150 hectares of land, which is insanely small.
Right.
Yeah, and they have only found. They're just estimating the numbers. They have only found. I have no idea how many they have found, but it's not many. It's like 50 animals or so. I can't really remember, to be honest, but something like that. And they're just estimating that there are some animals barred down around the area, and they have no idea on how many animals are actually left here. But it's not many. It's not many.
That's crazy. So do you know what are the chances that you were able to see that one animal, that night when it
It's
wasn't even in peak season?
I can assure you for that I'm the only European guy that ever have seen one live, and also I am the 15th of non-local people that have seen one in the wild.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
Yeah.
So, fortunately, the female we found, it was not an animal that had been found before, so it had no microchip in her. So it's actually a new one to the books, which was very nice to see a wild adult mature female ready to do her duty, if you want to say
Right.
so. Yeah.
So what are the steps that they're taking to record the animals and ultimately help the species?
Right now, they have some holding pens at the facility or at the reserve they have in the in the area, where they actually, if they have this deal, if local people find them, they made a deal that if they deliver them the animals to them, instead of killing them or selling them, they will provide them with a basket of food instead of killing it. So they once in a while find these animals in the wild, and then they bring them to them. So they keep all these animals that are brought to them in these holding pens. So that first of all they microchip them, then they six them, and then they put them together in these pens. Then they keep them for almost a season. So when they breed in these pens, they don't hold the females back to get the eggs and incubate them. They actually release the females into the wild so they can lay the eggs in the wild, and by then making the whole process more natural. But then again, it's a very is a very dangerous technique because a lot of things can go wrong. And in situations like this, with a species so rare, with animals so few far in between, you want to have all the babies to survive. So, but there's no resources for it, and they don't have the time because the guy working there, he's a farmer as well, and the biologist teacher, he cannot come there every day. It's almost 4 hours drive from Guatemala City where he lives.
Wow.
And teaches. So it's not something you can, a place you can go every day. So they need resources to take this project even further, and that's the next step. And I'm actually moving forward, trying to help them doing this.
Yeah, I mean, that's part that I was going to ask, if they've considered like talking to people in the reptile hobby or people who procreate them on a hobbyist basis to, get more insight.
Yeah, I don't think they're interested in this because the Guatemalan people, or the Guatemala as a country is very, protective of their endangered wildlife. So I don't think they're looking into doing a project with the private sector, but I do believe that they're very interested in doing larger projects where people help them with stuff and help them with money to buy up more land, help them with whatever it takes to help the species. But yeah, it's a fantastic country, but it's a country filled with poverty. It's a country filled with corruption. It's not so easy just to go through a process like this and do it legally. It takes quite some time to do this. I think many years.
Was it something, as coming from Denmark, was it easy to get into this part of Guatemala?
It's you have to know people to do so. It's not for the faint-hearted either. It's very harsh. It's very harsh conditions, and it's not very nice to live there more than 2 days.
Did you have any issue? I mean, you must stick out pretty.
Oh yeah, I'm a fucking gringo. Standard up gringo that everybody looks at. But it's quite funny. But it's something different, and I try to travel a lot, and I love to travel, and I love seeing other cultures and stuff like that. So I just feel really happy to have found that place, and I'm definitely going back. That's for sure. Even though it's not very pleasant to stay there in the wild with them. That's for sure.
Well, you pretty much hit a home run the first time, so yeah. You can only go down.
I'll probably never see one in the wild again.
So have you obviously you've done a lot of traveling, but have you herped other places around the world?
I've herped in Australia, but that was that's probably, that's almost 12 years ago. So I was 16 years old. So that's, I didn't see a lot. I saw some boy cat. I was mostly in Queensland, so I saw the most, the common stuff, the stuff everyone sees, which is quite cool anyway, But I really want to go back there to do like the whole tour. Going from the East Coast to the West Coast, seeing all the cool stuff, all the rarest, all the lizards, all the taipans, of course, the brown snakes, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's difficult because if you were to go there, I mean, there's at least 4 or 5 regions that pretty much could take up a week or 2 weeks of your time. So
that's for sure. That's over a month worth of trip, I would say.
Yeah. I would say
if you want to, you need a couple of months. That's for sure.
Yeah. So what's your pinnacle animal to find out in the wild, or something that you want to go look for in the future?
Okay, so this was actually my pinnacle animal to find in the wild, like the Heloderma Charles Bogarty. That was my pinnacle animal to find. If I have to say one more, it would be Rarest cropeni.
And that's the Corallus that was just discovered, right?
Yeah, it was rediscovered. It was only known from dead specimens and old photographs. So yeah,
that's crazy.
Rediscovered.
Yes,
I think
but
in 2017. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So that's my my next holy grail.
Gotcha. And are these Mexican or these beaded lizards, are they present in the hobby?
They are not. They are not.
Is that a good thing?
I think both ways. It would be nice to have them in the hobby, but I think it's also good that they're not in the hobby because
they can be exploited, especially for farmers who, if you're not having a lot of income and all of a sudden, if you come in there and say, hey, I'll give you, $300 for this. I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't have any problem digging up a few.
They have never been legally in the hobby. They have been in the hobby illegally, and I know for a fact that the punishment for having them illegally is very high. There was a smuggler in the Czech Republic many years ago that had 4 or 5 specimens that that sold them here in Europe, and the guy that bought some of them, he was actually here in Denmark, and he was fined a very large fine for keeping them illegally. And also they were taken from him and moved to a Danish zoo, which is pretty cool. So I can actually go and see them in the Danish zoo when I want to, but unfortunately it's 4 males that are left, so no females.
That sucks. Now you're getting deep into beaded lizards, so what do you have right behind you?
I think I would like to actually show them to you instead of talking to them, because there's actually a very visual difference between all of them. So, first of all, I always use hex armor gloves. It's not because I'm a pussy, I just don't want to get bit. And I've seen one of my friends get bit by a Gila monster, and it was not a nice sight. So I respect them a lot. They are venomous lizards, and they can be dangerous. So,
hey man, you got to risk fingers here.
Yeah, so these actually go, quite up the arm and almost up to the elbow. So when I handle these animals like this with these gloves, there's no danger at all. And I find them to be actually very, most of them are very calm. So, yeah.
Are those specifically made for things like Gilas, or does it work as well on like venomous snakes?
It's called venom gloves. So they were actually made for venomous snakes. And I don't know if you've seen some of the guys that keep huts. They often have a pair of these where they like maybe handle a small venomous snake, but it's not, don't risk it with large venomous snakes. They are proven to be 100%,
I wouldn't test.
Hook them out anyways. It's it's just for safety, but
yeah,
I wouldn't I wouldn't risk my life with a large elapid or something like that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, my throat is a bit sore.
No, you're good. So for people who are listening on the downloaded podcast, and like Kasper's been sitting behind these like 8, it looks like 4-foot enclosures, which I guess all have beaded lizards in them.
Exactly. So this is one of them. I don't know if the light is good, but this is called a Rio Fuerte beaded lizards, and it's one of the species I keep. It's from Mexico. It's from the Alamos region of northern Mexico, where these guys live along the Rio Fuerte Basin, and they're actually a very, very colorful beaded lizard. They have a lot of yellow. They have lots and lots of pattern all over the body.
I was going to say, I mean, I don't know much about like Heloderma and that stuff, but I always saw the beaded lizards as kind of ugly, and the Gilas are very nice. But this one's got a lot of color and a lot of pattern.
It's actually funny because they aren't the prettiest animal, but I actually think they're so ugly that they actually are cute.
And I know like a pinnacle species is like the all black ones, and people love those.
Yeah, that's called the Chapin beaded lizard, and I'll get to that later. But this is like the northernmost species of beaded lizard, called the Rio Fuerte beaded lizard, and it's very cool. It's also the most common species kept in captivity. So,
Okay.
for those out there that don't know about beaded lizards, there are currently 4 species that are totally, separated from each other, and this is one of them. This is the most commonly kept species. So now I'll go down to the Mexican beaded lizard, and it's the beaded lizard called Heloderma horridum, and it's the most common, species in the wild. It's a species with the widest distribution all over Mexico. So it goes from Rio Fuerte, where this species live, and overlap with this species all the way down to Oaxaca, which is the southernmost state, along with Chiapas in Mexico. So I'll grab one of those.
Now, all these guys, while they're trying to like move around and we can hear them hiss and stuff, they seem, I mean, no one's trying to bite you. Is that typical?
They are pretty hissy. They are very vocal animals, and it's not it's not because they're aggressive or anything, but most of them are just noisy, and very few and far between are actually aggressive. But this one I'm bringing out now is he's the devil. He's the worst.
Well, he's coming out to say, hey, he's poking his head out.
He will actually try to bite me. If I let him, he will bite me for sure. For sure. Oops. Oh. Okay. And they're super strong as well. So you can see this one is very different than the other one. It has way more reduced pattern. It's very black, and it had white or yellow dots on it. It has not as contrasted pattern, not as wide bands on the tail, and it's actually also a species that grows very large. So this one is a Heloderma horridum or Heloderma horridum.
Now, this guy, for people who can't see, is about like the length of your forearm, like your hand / without counting the tail. But how do these guys get any bigger? Is that adult size?
You will get bigger. They can actually get huge, these guys. So this is only a juvenile. He's only 3 years of age, 4 years of age. And these guys also get very old. So you're looking at an animal that can easily get to 35, 40 years old.
Wow.
If they're kept right, of course.
And do you know how late they've bred them as far as age goes? How long that they can reproduce?
I have 2 babies from a US guy called Steve Angeli, and it's 2 babies from a pair that's over 30 years of age. So that's pretty cool. So I know for a fact that they can breed very, very old.
And so what do you do to breed these guys, or have you bred them yet?
I have not bred them yet, any of them. But last year I had eggs from my all black Chapin beaded lizards, but they all went bad after a short while, which is very unfortunate. But shit happens. But these guys also need, like most python species, they need some month off food. They need some month with a cold period. So instead of giving them heat at day like you do with python species. These guys go at the same temperature day and night in the wintertime for 3 to 4 months. So they're kept quite cold, but not as cold as I'm used to with the python species. But these guys, I'm trying to find the Fahrenheit for you. I keep them around 68 down to 64 in the winter for 3 to 4 months without feeding them. And that's with no light, no heat, no nothing at all. And then
is it simulating a time where they would burrow in the wild?
Exactly. It's stimulating a time where they would be burrowing away from the dry time or the dry period. And then you raise the temperature. You make sure that they get a large water bowl. You make sure that the humidity rises afterwards, and then they will eat for some month. And then right now in April and May, they will start copulating. So right now these guys are together trying to get them to copulate each other.
So do you just keep them together this whole season, and do you feed them together?
Yeah, I don't feed them together because they're actually, believe it or not, they can't react very fast when food is around. So I don't feed them together, but I keep them together, and then I just check them out every night, and then I usually found them to breed mostly at night. So when the lights are off.
So you have caught copulations?
Yeah, I have luckily.
And I don't know anything about keeping a lizard like this. What do you feed them and how often?
It's just like snakes, actually. These guys, they don't require the same amount of food as a monitor lizards because they are quite inactive. They use, like I said before, 90% of their lives in a burrow, so they're not, they're not very active like a monitor species. So these guys only feed once a week, and big animals feed up to maybe once every other week. And then you just feed them a frozen thawed mice or a small rat or something like that. So it's just like keeping a snake, actually.
That's crazy. I had no idea. How many, would they take multiple mice, or is it just like an adult mouse every week for an animal that size?
Well, they will take multiple mice or one larger rat, something like that.
Gotcha. And it looks like your setup is pretty straightforward. What is it? Aspen and a hide and a light?
Yeah, exactly. It's very straightforward. It's just, I just do what other people does, so that are successful with this. So it seems to work very well, and I keep them around. These guys don't like heat a lot. They don't like it a lot. Not like monitor lizards, so you have to keep them quite cool in the hot spot. So only keep them for around. What is it? I have to go to the dashboard.
I can do the translation. You got gloves.
Keep them around 89 for a hot spot, which is pretty low for a lizard if you want to,
I mean, especially if people know anything about monitor lizards, you can easily get a savanna up to like 120 degrees or something like that.
Oh yeah, they love the heat. Especially the desert living species, they need that heat to even breed. So this is like the third species of beaded lizards, and it's the chapan or the chap the what is it called, the alvarezi. It's the all black one.
So in what region are those? In Mexico as well?
They are in Mexico. They are in the Chiapas region of Mexico, and it's the mountain region that goes are right next to Guatemala. So these are actually also found in the mountain region in Guatemala, right next to the border to Mexico. So it's pretty cool. And these guys, they mostly get all black, and they get quite large.
And that one doesn't look, especially like in the tail region and stuff, as thick as the other one. What is it, the Hortum?
Yeah, it's just because this guy, he's just a younger animal, and yeah, he's not been fed that much.
Gotcha. So how many pairs are you working with right now of each species?
Right now I have some unsexed of the Rio Fuerte. I don't know the sexes yet, but I do have a reverse trio of these guys, and I have a trio of the other Horidon. So I have around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have around 20 beaded lizards right now.
Do they have to reach a certain age to sex them, or can you probe them early?
You cannot probe them at all. You need to they need to be mature, and you need to ultrasound them to be 100% of the sex.
Well, that's a pain in the ass. Do you plan on ultrasounding every single one of them, or do you just pair?
I know for a fact some of them are what they are because either they have copulated or they have produced eggs. So I'm pretty sure of the big ones. But in the future, I don't want to be ultrasounding them because it can be quite hard. It can vary from time of the year. Sometimes it can look like a female, sometimes it can look like a male. So you really just want to grow them up and pair them up just to see what they are really.
Is there any downside of keeping males together? Like some other species, males may fight.
These guys will fight in the breeding season, but they won't kill each other. So they do this cool dance where they're on the side and they're like arching their backs. Like wrestling with the other male. It looks really cool. And actually sometimes it's very good for them to wrestle. If you have two males, if you want to get the male to copulate or show interest in the female at all. So it's very good.
I mean, that must be, because I held a Gila for the first time. I was like, what? It's so different. They're so distinctly like hard and like armor plated.
Oh yeah. It's very cool. All these small, they're called beaded lizards because of all these small beads on their skin, and it's actually bones, all these small ones here. On each scale, there's a small bone, just like an alligator or crocodile for that matter, actually. And it look like beads, so that's why they have the most common name beaded lizards from. If you can see the texture here. It's very cool. Super cool lizards. I love them. They're very fun, very personal. Great captives.
Now, are there a lot of people breeding these in captivity?
Not the black one. But the other one is pretty, the other two species are pretty commonly bred in captivity, actually. Especially in the United States, there's a lot of breeding going on over there.
Have you had to import most of these from the U.S.? Or were they?
Yeah, I've been importing some stuff from the U.S., but I've found quite some stuff here in Europe as well. So it's almost the same, but it's very cool.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what do you look forward to in the future of your collection? Are you going to get more beadeds? Are you going to go somewhere else?
I'm not gonna get any more beaded lizards. I'm very happy where I'm right now with those. Yeah.
Do you have room to expand if you wanted to?
I do. Yeah, I do have. I actually have this. You can see this.
Oh damn! Those monitor cages? Or?
Yeah, there's some. That's where I usually kept my monitor lizards. And or other stuff. So.
Yeah, for people who couldn't see, those were pretty much cages that took up an entire, basically the size of a small room.
Yeah. I can show it again.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. That was just monitor cages pretty much all over there. But they're mostly empty right now.
You keep a Komodo dragon, dude.
I probably could have if I just, used all this room for one cage.
Yeah.
I
So
could
what were you
probably keep one
keeping?
single male. Yeah.
I mean, you must have been keeping some larger species of monitors.
Yeah, I was keeping lace monitors. I was keeping lace monitors in those cages. So
Do you ever plan on getting back into snakes?
yeah, I actually do. I do. I have snakes right now.
Oh, what do you have? Oh, well, the boas, right?
I have one Amazon Basin, a male, and I have 5 annulated tree boas.
You know what? I don't, for some reason, my mind went to like, oh yeah, he has like some like BCIs or something. But obviously you have something cool.
Yeah.
So where'd you get your basin?
When I got it last summer. So it's a fairly new thing for me. I've kept green tree pythons over the years. I've had awful success with those. I've killed so many of those. They're just my nemesis species. I can't keep those. No matter what I do, I fail at keeping them. Either I get egg bound female, or they die after laying shitty eggs, or they suddenly just fill off the perch dead. I have no idea, and I've kept them over 3 times, and I've been disappointed every time. So I just wanted a green snake, but I wanted something different. So I went with the Amazon Basin, because I could get this male for a fairly good price, and he was the last male in the litter, and it was a good deal.
So it was captive born and bred.
Yeah, of course. I don't think Brazil or the countries around the Amazon Basin, they don't export anymore of that stuff.
Okay.
So haven't seen a wild caught basin in many years.
Mm-hmm. So I guess if people don't know, what is the difference between an Amazon basin and a regular emerald tree boa?
It's the easiest part to see the difference between the Amazon Basin and the northern emerald tree boa is looking at the pattern and the head scalation. It's like the Amazon Basin have all these small scales on the head, while the northernmost species of the green tree boa have these like larger plates as scales on the head. Also, their pattern is almost like lightning bolts. Almost look like this, go down the side. Whether where the basin have all this, maybe I have no idea actually how a wild caught basin looks like, how the normal face is. I have no idea, but they usually have this stripe all the way down its back, and it had these small barbs.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something we've bred into in captivity as far as the high white, or they come out that high white.
I think most we would find in the wild have not a lot of white. It's very desirable in captivity, so of course, and Amazon basins have a long history of captive breeding, even longer than the northern green tree boas. So they have been bred in so many generations, and all the breeders have been breeding towards more white. So it's just like jungle carpet pythons. Really, they don't look like that in the wild.
You can't find an ugly one anymore.
Not very often, but who am I to know? I've never been in the Amazon Basin, never been looking, never been finding one of those. So I could be wrong, but it's
And I've heard that they are a lot calmer. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Way calmer. I have kept one northern many years ago. That was crazy. But then again, I think it's something with how many generations they have been bred in captivity, where all the northerns are mostly come from wild caught parents or are wild caught themselves. So I just believe it's just a matter of time in captivity, and or how many generations they have been bred in captivity. Yeah. They are more calm for sure.
Now you have super expensive taste. Because you're like, it's a good price. And I mean, if people are like, oh, I heard about basins,
That
and
was it, he was around 1,000 euros, which is super cheap.
that's very cheap. So if people don't know, I haven't seen many basins for under $4,000 to $6,000.
No,
Yeah, that's US dollars.
they actually fetch a higher price in the US right now than they are in Europe, because I think the market for costly animals like that is way better in the States. People don't have faith in the market in Europe, so people keep what they want, not they don't believe they can, earn from it. So, and me neither. If I wanted to earn money in this hobby, I would never have started. I've lost so many, so much. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell, I guess, the American mentality is always capitalism, money off of everything. So it's like we're always making our rooms, filling it with animals that can make us money. I mean, do you
Yeah.
see kind of the opposite over there?
Yeah, mostly people are just keeping what they really like. But when the ball python market was, at the top, we had the same kind of people over here, of course. We had a lot of people investing in that market, if you want to call it that. And yeah, all those people are not here anymore, so that's how it is. Now actually people that keep ball pythons actually do like ball pythons, and that's good with me. I do like a ball python. I think it's a nice snack.
Yeah, they could be fun.
It's boring as fuck, but it's nice.
Then again, what's the difference between that and an emerald just sits there too, but it sits there, it looks pretty. But
Yeah, exactly.
so what was the other Corrales that you said you had?
The annulated tree boas. They look like Amazon tree boa, like a hortulanas, but they're just very docile. Don't come in the same amount of color phases. They're different. They're very different. They actually branched off the whole hortulanas, group around the same time as a little bit after the green tree boas. So they are very distinct from the hortulanas, but they do have the similarities, of course. But there's currently two species of those boas, and it was first called Corallus annulatus or annulata, but now it's Corallus annulata and Corallus bloombergi, something like that. And they're primarily found from Ecuador up to Guatemala, actually. So it's a very cool species of tree boa, and very calm, very nice. Just something different.
So you said that they're calm, so it's kind of like having an Amazon tree boa that's calm.
Exactly.
That's pretty nice. What do you hope to get those to breed? Do you have a pair?
Yeah, I do have. I have 3.2 right now, but they're all babies. They're all very young. And I've heard from other breeders that they take quite some time to mature up, and so that's a long-term project. I'm maybe 6 years away if I'm lucky. So 5, 6.
Do you have any problems with feeding them rodents or anything like that?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Super easy.
That's good.
Thanks. Yeah. They just you don't need to feed them. That's the only thing I needed to convert into when I started keeping boas again, like feeding a lot less than pythons. I fed less, normally with pythons, but I have to feed even less now, which is that was probably the hardest part, seeing that hungry tree boa all day long. But that's how it is.
That's why that always confused me, because I have an Amazon and it seems like a green tree, you don't feed it a lot and it takes a while for it to go to the bathroom, all this stuff. It has a slow metabolism, and you can tell. The Amazon, it will eat and then it will shit like the next day, and then it will be hungry for all the rest of the days, but I'm not supposed to feed it.
But
it eat constantly.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's weird. It's weird, but it's one of those species that can actually take the the average snake keeper's food cycle. But annulated tree boas and emerald tree boas of the two species can't do that. It will simply die from it, or get really sick. You'll end up having tons of problems. That's for sure. So these are, even though they look like Amazon tree boas, they are very different, very very different.
How do you keep things like that? Do you keep them in tubs as babies or in enclosures?
Yeah, I do keep them in tubs, and just standard snake racks. I keep them around. What is it? Like their hotspot is like 82, which is pretty low, and then they go down to like 71 at night.
And that's the same. You're turning off all the heat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the basins are kept the same way. They're just kept or it's just kept in a cage. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So would you say that you are like a tub keeper or a cage guy? Do you have a little bit of both?
I do like cages the most, to be honest. Also, why I got all those huge cages, because I really enjoy seeing animals. If it's rarest, they walk around, climb around. But with snakes, I like rack systems too. I do. It's really nice. It's very beneficial for some species that are very timid, or just are used to living in burrows, like ball pythons and stuff like that. So I respect racks a lot. I think it's important in our hobby and in keeping reptiles in general. It's also, I know for a fact that a lot of zoos use rack systems as well. So it's a professional and it's a right way to do it as well, just as much as a cage is a good idea for some other species. So I like both.
Gotcha. So I know a lot of people are asking about Papuan pythons.
Oh yeah, those are my favorite pythons.
So when did you get into those?
Actually, the same year as I got my Bolens pythons, 2010. I had 6 of those, and I kept some. I was lucky enough to acquire a reverse trio of captive-born babies from 2010 from a German guy, and he was the last one to breed them in Europe before me. And I grew those up. They were never breeding because they were way too young. But I also had some older wild-caught or long-term captive animals that were around 11 years old when I was lucky enough to breed them. So, yeah, they're very, very cool. They're super strong snakes, very nice, very intelligent, highly intelligent, very vocal, just all around, probably the coolest python you can ever imagine, in my opinion. I've kept many Bolins, and I would any day take a Papuan Python over a Bolin. If I could only choose one of them, I would do that any day. Any day.
People are gonna go crazy.
Yep. Bolins are nice, but they're pretty boring as well, to be honest.
How would you boring in like temperament?
They're just I don't know. It's probably because I just like snakes where you don't necessarily know every move they're gonna make. I like to be on my toes. I like keeping stuff. I don't know 100%, and I just felt like I could read a Boelens python 100%. And I don't know why. They're just maybe too sleepy for my taste.
So
I like amethystine pythons. I've kept a ton of those as well. Really enjoyed those. I like those a lot as well. So I like, even though I like annulated tree boas and basins, when I get into the larger snakes, I like more active stuff.
Well, I live pretty much right near Austin Warwick and Tony Jerome. I don't know if you know them, but they both have Papuans.
Yeah.
And those are a snake that you come in the room and then it knows you're there and it checks you out and then like I feel like scrubs are the same way, but scrubs are like the
they're dominant. They're dominant.
Maybe.
Yeah, and papuans eat the scrubs in the wild as well. So
really,
the smarter outsmart the not so smart snakes.
And I mean, I've heard so many horror stories of them eating each other.
Oh yeah, there's actually a funny story back in the days, and I think it was in the 80s or something like that, in Dallas Zoo. They used to keep like this big terrarium or big cage with all sorts of constrictor snakes. There was like anacondas, boa constrictors, all the big ones, the reed ticks, Burmese pythons, rock pythons, and Pawan pythons, scrub pythons, all the big ones. And they, for some reason, didn't understand why the snakes were suddenly not there. So suddenly the reed tick was missing, the green anaconda was missing, and other stuff just started to disappear in the cage. And they actually thought that the snakes were escaped the cages and just went off, until they one day discovered the Papuan python with one of the snakes halfway down the throat. So they're definitely a snake eating snake. They're very, very powerful. They will take down big prey item for sure.
So how do you ensure that when you put this male with the female, they won't eat each other?
That's a good question, and it's one of the questions I get asked the most with this species, because they will eat each other, and there are countless of people that have experienced this trying to breed them. And I know for a fact that one of the grandfathers in herpetoculture called Frank Schofield, he almost bred every species of snakes, or not snakes, or of pythons that existed in the hobby. He's from UK, and he's like one of the greatest, in my opinion. And he could not just produce Papuan pythons because his female just kept eating the males. So, and I've heard this story from so many people, and I just did something different. Every time I cleaned their cages, and that was like maybe every week, every second week, I would put them in together while I was going through the cage cleaning. And I would just sit there for 15 minutes afterwards, just looking at them. I just wanted to get them to know each other from the beginning, from the get-go. So I knew for a fact that she didn't get surprised when there was suddenly a male in the breeding season, because these females require a lot of food to develop follicles. So for them to actually mate up, they need to know each other, plus the female needs to get fed a lot after the periods of no food. So they need to get more food than a carpet python. I would feed a female maybe twice a week after the the off food season, and I would put in the male all the time when they were not feeding. So I would try to feed the male, and I would feed the female twice a week, and I would just simply right after put the male inside the female's cage again, because if she didn't get fed, she might because she was developing follicles and they were copulating, she needed something more. So if I didn't feed her twice a week, I'm sure that she would actually go look for another food source in that male. So you need to be on your toes. You need to, it's not a species you just leave for 2 weeks without noticing anything. You need to be on your toes. You need to go there once a day, check up on them, feed that female a lot, and also have a very decent sized male. You can't, like carpet python, use a tiny male. Forget about it. He will just be like spaghetti. He will get eaten for sure. You need a big ass male with a big ass head, to control that female. Mm-hmm. So I used a big male. He was so big that if she decided that she wanted to eat him, she would not be able to eat him.
So do you think it's possible though that the male could eat a female? or is that less common?
I think it's less common because I think it's mostly because of the males get eaten in the breeding season, and I think it's mostly because the females don't get enough food and often enough. I think that's the main reason.
Do you think in the wild they could copulate, and then after she copulates with whoever, she just eats them?
Very well. I think that's very possible. Yeah, I think that's very possible.
Yeah, because it seems like, or maybe maybe we're not giving them enough room, so the male can't exactly get away. If you're in a 4-foot cage with a giant female, or even a 6-foot cage,
yeah,
he's fucked.
Actually, my male, he was way longer. He was like maybe 15 feet. He was super long, but very, very slim. My female was very girthy, but not as long at all. But they were same age. But she was way stronger because of the girth, and she actually broke that male's back the second season I was trying to copulate them. Because he was just annoying her. He was trying to copulate maybe twice a day, and she was just getting tired of him. So she just used her mass and pressed his body, in the side of the enclosure, and she literally almost snapped his back. So after that, he got a big kink on his back because of the aggression from the female. But she didn't, go the next step and striking at him at all. But you could easily feel that she was annoyed. She didn't want him there at all. And I think you have to notice that as well. That could be a step that we're leaning towards an eaten male. So
that's wild. So were you watching them all the time, or you just checked them once a day?
Yeah, I checked them once or twice or 3 times a day. Yeah.
So
but I was never observing them. I just went into the room, looked into the glass, and checked them. Then went away again.
Mm-hmm.
Never disturbed them.
So was that I know you said you had a group of them. Did you produce with one pair, or did you end up getting multiple pairings to go?
I only produced with one pair because I only had one pair that was actually old enough. So the history with this species is that there have never been a noted copulation that led to eggs with animals that were younger than 10 years of age, which is very different from other python species. So,
and
old.
do you think that has to do with the snake itself, or it's prone to stressing out from moving around, or both?
I have no idea. There is absolutely no natural biology, studied with this snake at all. We have nothing to go from, so we know nothing about these snakes in the wild. It's very sad, but that's how it is.
Mm-hmm. How big was the?
That made it very hard to try and reproduce the natural environment with this species. So, and the year where because I had pairings with these 4 years in a row, nothing happened. I saw a female growing large follicles, and then she just absorbed them, and that was it. So that year I got eggs for the first time, and the only time, because I sold all my snakes the year after, was the year that I actually tried to mimic a wet season. So all of April, because I know for a fact that in the habitat in the wild, it rains a lot in April. That's like a month where the heavy rain falls. So I just try to mimic that, and I spray them down once in a while, maybe once every morning actually when I remembered, and that seemed to help them, get into that cycle.
Mm-hmm. How big was the clutch?
It was only it was 15 eggs, but 5 of them didn't hatch. So they were all fertile, but the five of the snakes were actually full-term dead in the egg when the other hatched. Yeah.
Do you just incubate at normal python temperatures?
Yeah, I did. And it took over 100 days.
Whoa.
Over 100 days. That's almost minus a species. It takes that long. Of course, it's longer, but
Yeah. That's wild. I mean, I've had corn snakes take 100 days, so
It take even longer than we take eggs. And that's pretty wild.
I guess if it's just a bigger snake takes longer to form.
Yeah, they were around like the babies were around 100, like almost 100 grams when they hatched.
Yeah, that's
A big snake.
and
Yeah.
now what else were you breeding at this time? What other pythons were you breeding?
That season, I got the papuans. I had no other breedings. I had the Bolins breeding, but that didn't lead to anything. So I was really concentrating on the papuans that year.
Do you think that's important to just focus on one particular species?
Yeah, I think so. And if I bred a species multiple times, I have no intention in keep breeding the following year. I like the puzzle part of it. I don't like. I hate feeding baby snakes. I hate raising baby snakes. If it's not a species that I'm really into and that I've never bred before. So to raise another 50 carpet pythons that year, that would too much work.
So once you breed it once, you're like, whatever, I figured this out. Now you need something else to figure out.
Yeah, I did a lot of carpet python clutches, but yeah, I've been turning towards that. I just don't find it that interesting anymore after I've done something. But with Pawan Pythons, that's one species I definitely, I miss them a lot. That's for sure. So I just actually bought a small female, a baby. So I'm going to pick it up in June. So I'm gonna keep one as a pet.
Now you just gotta wait, 10 years if you want to breed it.
Yeah, but I'm the number. You're still young.
There you go. I mean, that is a crazy thing that like especially for snake people, we talk about this a lot because there's only so many people in like our age range. Cause I'm 26.
Yeah.
But for someone to be so successful with different species like you have by 28 is just crazy.
Yeah, but then again, I've been keeping them for almost my entire life, so I've been very much into how to breed reptiles ever since I was a kid. So, and of course, I've been keeping a lot. So, compared to other people that maybe start later, I've had already many years doing it. So, yeah. But yeah, I'm very happy to be one of the few persons that can actually say that I've bred Pawan Pythons. That's by far my biggest achievement in the breeding, apartment or whatever department, whatever we say. So yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I know that like at least for me, like through high school, then college, then now, like I moved like 10 times. I was irresponsible. I was an idiot. How did you manage like all of that? And I mean, there's so many transitional periods in that time frame.
So I've been, of course, I've been moving in apartments in Copenhagen, which is the capital of Denmark, and I've been living in 2 different apartments over the years. And I've tried to have my snakes in there, but my hobby was so big that I didn't have the room for it, simply because of course, I couldn't afford a huge ass apartment in the middle of the city. So I was not able to keep my animals there. So I was actually so lucky that my parents didn't use their basement, and they're only 20 minutes away from where I lived in the city. So meanwhile, I was studying and living in Copenhagen. I had almost my entire collection at my parents' house at that time. So that was how I did that throughout the years.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but of course it did mean that I had to go to my parents once a while, and maybe too often, in my opinion, back then. But I know for a fact that my mother was very happy about it. So
yeah, I mean your parents are clearly pretty forgiving, and then plus they went to Guatemala with you, so
they're super nice. They've been very supportive of almost everything I've been doing regarding animals my entire life. You know, I don't think they have never said no to me if I came and said, you know, I want a Burmese python when I was 12 years old. You know, they didn't say no. They just said, of course, how can we help you?
Are they animal people themselves?
Money yourself, but how, you know, I cannot tell you how many times my father have helped me, driving me around, picking up big wooden cages, helping me lifting them up and down the stairs, down in the basement, back and forth again, building stuff for me. He's been just great all this time. So I've been very fortunate to have parents like that, for sure.
Does it rub off at all, or do they just deal with the snakes? Do they like them, or
they have no idea? You know, I remember when I was doing some travels with the studies I did, and of course I couldn't be back home taking care of the animals meanwhile. So they've been used to taking care of, like, changing water dishes, spraying, you know, stuff that needed that, whatever. They, you know, as long as they didn't have to feed stuff, they were just, you know, happy to help. And I do remember actually my mother feeding tarantulas at some point. Wow.
See, even I wouldn't feed a tarantula, I don't think so.
Dude, I fucking hate tarantulas, and I kept like 5 of them back when I was a kid, and now I'm terrified of them.
Really?
I'm not terrified of them, but I just, those and centipedes, they can just, you know, fuck off. I don't do that.
Yeah, centipedes, I haven't gotten to the point where
centipedes
I've been able to hold them or anything.
Created by whoever did that. That is just insane.
Mm-hmm.
Centipedes sound so nasty.
Yeah, I've never really gotten into arachnids or any type of bugs. Or
it seems like people that go that route, they just like one, you know, the first day they have like 1 tarantula, 14 days after they have like 250. It goes from 0 to 1 million so fast with that part of the hobby. It's like, how would I ever run around feeding 500 arachnids in one day, man? No fucking way.
No. And God forbid they reproduce and then you have like 1 million of them.
No way. That's not my thing. I do appreciate the wild and stuff like that. It's not that I hate them, but you know, it's not for me to keep, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason, at least for me personally, that I keep snakes. You know, I feed mice.
Super forgiving, so nice.
Yeah. Even, I mean, you're going a step further with lizards and stuff. Things with 4 legs are hard to take care of.
Yeah, but okay. Then again, I do travel a lot, and I'm actually trying to educate myself towards some nature conservation. So I do have to take classes different places in the world, which means that that I'm not able to be home to feed all my stuff all year round, which is why I actually send my monitor lists on loan, because I do love them. I really like keeping them, even though they're a lot of work. But you know, I just need to choose stuff that I can definitely keep on a weekly basis, and that I know that I can get some help to clean or feed while I'm gone. So, yeah.
Absolutely, that makes sense. So
I can do that with snakes, and I can do that with beaded lizards. That's not possible with 6 giant monitor lizards.
Right. So I mean, you found a very snake-like lizard.
Oh yeah.
At least.
They are pretty much just snake on legs.
Hell yeah. So we've reached 2 hours. Is there anything that you want to get out there, where people can reach you and stuff like that?
People can reach me on Facebook and on Instagram. I don't post a lot on Facebook and Instagram. I'm not in many groups, but you can find me. I'm always available. I love talking about stuff, even if it's, herpetoculture as a thing in the wild, or if it's, the private sector. I love to talk about everything. It's really my whole entire life. So I just love talking to other people that love the same thing as I do. So you can reach me there. My full name is Kasper with a K, and Christensen, and it's pretty straightforward. You can just reach me there. And if I can help you with anything regarding Pythons, Pawan Pythons, whatever, just hit me up.
And you know what's, you have such a good first name that you're like the reptile Madonna. Like people can just say Kasper, and then they're like, oh yeah, I heard of that guy.
Yeah.
You don't even need a last name. My name's Joe. Everyone's name is Joe. So
yeah, there's almost no Joes in Denmark. That's for sure. I think I know of one guy called Joe in Denmark. That's not a
yeah. Then I can move somewhere else. Then maybe that's my issue.
But I've heard a lot of guys called Kasper in the States, but it's mostly with the C.
With the C.
Yeah.
I thought that there was actually another like Morelia person, Kasper, with a C. And
you think so?
I don't know. I might be making shit up. Don't.
Probably just me.
It was you. I just didn't probably know of you at the time.
All over Morelia Python, the forums back then and all the Facebook groups. But I've been lately with all this Facebook stuff. It's not that I'm scared of people know shit about me. It's not that, but I just respect the social media, and I don't want to spend my entire time there and my entire life there. So I'm trying to really, not be online all the time. Just maybe do it once in a while, check once a day, or I don't have to post stuff all the time. So, and I don't. So
I mean, it's super helpful and super productive, like for us as the community. But if you get too dark and
sure.
it can get in your way real quick.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. You can reach us at portcitypythons.com. That's really it. If Melissa was, of course, yeah. If Melissa was here, she would.
You in Tinley someday, or whenever I go to the States, that would be cool to meet up.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for sure. Whenever we're gonna try to do Tinley. Huh?
We're the same age almost.
Yeah, there you go. And there's not much of that. Sorry, older people out there. I know Evan's listening and he's probably offended. That's all right. So, all right. I don't know how to end the show without Melissa here. So thanks, guys. And Kasper, you're still going to be here.